Well, hi, I'm Neil Ward-Dutton, Research Director at MWD Advisors, and I'm joined today by three distinguished guests to talk about intelligent automation. And that's a strategy that combines technologies like RPA, BPM, and AI. It's a really, really fast-moving area, so we want to talk to you about how we got to here, what's happening right now, and where we're going next. And my three distinguished guests are, so we have Anne McClelland, who is VP of Global Technology Partnerships from Blue Prism. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
We have Malcolm Ross, who is VP of Product Marketing for Appian.
Thank you.
Hi, Malcolm. Yeah. And we have Todd Lohr, who is Principal Technology Enablement and Automation from KPMG.
Great, thank you.
Welcome, Todd.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's start by talking about where we've come from, because I think it's kind of important. You know, a lot of this stuff has actually been around in some form for quite a while. RPA has been around for at least 10 years, I'd say. And AI is pretty much forever. I mean, certainly at least 50 years in some form. So why is there such excitement about these things and particularly interest in the combination of them right now? So how about we start with yourself, Anne? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's interesting because I think before a lot of these projects were sort of sandbox projects in the past, but now you see in all these industries new competitors coming in and over-the-top competitors like Amazon. Even, if you think of a Toys R Us and what's happened to them and how Amazon has totally disrupted the supply chain and the customer experience, that's happening in every industry now. And so they're realizing, okay, we need to take this stuff out of the sandbox and bring it to the boardroom and start talking about digital transformation and how are we going to change so that we can win.
Right. So there's very much a top-down pressure you're seeing.
Right,
now,
exactly.
What about you guys? You got anything to add on that? Why you think it's really such a hot deal right now?
You know, I think a lot of it is, in some of the spaces, I call the technologies the new but not new technologies. Fundamentally, the technology is not different. A lot of times when you're meeting with technology leaders and CIOs, there's a little bit of disconnect because it's like, well, wait a second, I've been following this kind of technology for 20 years. What's different? I think what has changed is the use, the efficacy, how you can actually deploy some of the technologies, moving to more low code, more configuration, more DevOps types models that kind of drives and democratizes the technology. So that's one thing that has changed fundamentally, I think, across all this space. Specifically, it's going to continue to go there when you start thinking about AI and how that's going to be mostly consumed through APIs. The other thing that's, I think, happening when people look specifically at AI, they look at the last 50 years since the books were written. You know, fundamentally the science has not changed. There's no new math, but what has changed is computational power, the data around it, and it's all growing in an exponential growth curve. So if you think about the last 20 years, we were at this part of the exponential growth curve. The next 5 is very likely that hockey stick up. So if you take a look at the technology, the fact that it's getting twice as good, half the cost year over year, that's going to have some profound differences as far as adoption in the market.
Fantastic. So obviously the top-down pressures around business change and the competition. Bottom up, if you like, sort of technology innovation pressures.
Absolutely.
What's your view on this,
Well,
Matt?
I mean, automation is a fundamental truth of enterprises, right? So entire industries have been revolutionized by automation, from the Henry Ford with the manufacturing line to even the first adoption like the ENIAC to automate calculations of projectiles. So it's a great space to be in and always be focusing on intelligent automation as a core provider of technology for your enterprise, because there's no fad about this. You should always be looking at your overall enterprise operations, thinking about how can I make this more efficient, more effective, reach customers more quickly, and if you're not doing that, someone else is. And as just heard, there's always that Moore's law curve of computational power, applying additional pressure on what you can automate, how quickly you can automate, and the type of technologies you can start adopting inside your enterprise as well.
Right. Awesome, Matt. It's almost as if we planned this, Malcolm, because my next question was to come back to you and say, you're talking about the focus of what we can automate and how the technology change is changing that.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with you and talk a little bit about the kinds of use cases that you're seeing for this? There's potentially so much we could do, but what are you seeing in your work
it's
right
one
now?
of the biggest challenges also we see with working with our customers is how to choose where to apply automation, because there's a lot of different places I can apply it. So you need to measure the value that you're going to derive from automation, so understanding the man hours saved or the typical interactions going to be gained, as well as the cost of performing that automation. So how complex is the solution? How complex is the calculation? So if you're starting off on like a new platform right away, we always say target the low-hanging fruit. Make sure it's providing high value with easy access as far as not too complex. Then as you gain awareness and capabilities with the automation technology, increase the complexity to drive even more value for your organization. So we've seen this adopted across every aspect to inside banking organizations for any money laundering detection, for a solution we do called legal automated workflow for managing judiciary requests into financial services organizations, to new product requests and pharmacovigilance, signal detection for drugs out in the for pharmaceutical companies. Being aware of when a bad interaction with a drug occurs and having automation of how you handle that and following up on that action.
Right.
To airport operations, and of course, more recently with Appian, of course, focusing on the customer engagement side and how do I actually automate the interactions and make those more efficient interactions. As I want to make sure the customer has an intention of buying something from my company, I want to make that as seamless as possible through automated technology.
So who wants to add some more?
Go ahead.
Yeah, some of the interactions can start very simply. So when you think
Okay.
about things like we have a large bank in the UK that started with a customer address change. And that may seem very simple, but they had over 10 different systems where the customer address was located. And so when they actually went ahead and made the change with people, it would take 3 days typically for the person to get it done.
Right.
And when they applied robots, they could do it in seconds, and it was flawless. So just the whole change of dynamic by being able to add automation is really what the key is there. Yeah.
And Todd, any perspectives from you on particular kinds of use cases that are really amenable to kind of new approaches to automation?
I think to follow up on Malcolm's comment, the more macro trend we're seeing is as the technologies are evolving, kind of going to the first part of our discussion, we're seeing that shift from what I think was more operating model focused automation in the last several years, and even before that historically, how do you start automating around your RP or some of your core more back office processes? The fundamental shift now, I guess this year you're seeing a lot of it. You started seeing it last year, and I think into the future, and if you look at what Appian's doing and others in this space, it's really the shift to the customer. And how do you actually start looking at front office, more direct customer interaction? How do you drive better levels of service, higher levels of automation? One of the great things about automation specifically around the customer, it's not at a degradation of service. And I think a lot of times when organizations have looked at how do I think about cost, how do I think about cost of serving the customer, it's typically been this trade-off of I have to do something that's going to impact service level. And with automation, it actually can, in many cases, provide better service levels and better experience, yet being very advantageous from a cost perspective. So I think you're going to start seeing more business model disruption as the technologies continue to follow that curve upwards, where people are going to be focusing on more of the core business, the core interaction with their customers.
I mean, and is it the case in your experience, Todd, that that there is correspondingly kind of less focused on the operational, the back office stuff, if you like, because that's are we at the stage where that's done, and therefore people are looking elsewhere, or is it a different vector? I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Done, but I would say where you're looking at cloud and cloud coming into play, especially in core operational areas, you're going to see less and less customization and automation around there, because the cloud is going to, more and more customers and companies are going to move to the cloud and have more standardization around that, and there's going to be less automation. There's still be some that you'd layer on top, but I think kind of driving some of the core operations to the cloud is going to drive more of the automation there, and it's going to be part of those packages. And coincidentally, you see those cloud players starting to build automation, partnering either through an ecosystem or on their own, building around the automation. So I think you'll see that as companies adopt more cloud-based services in the ERP world, and then I think where you'll see more bespoke automation and custom development design, where you use something like Appian, is going to be more in the business model, more in the regulatory space, more in things that are different or core to your business, depending on your industry, that are going to differentiate you.
Right, right. And again, a very nice segue point, because I was going to come back to you, Todd, for the next thing I was going to ask, which is really around types of value. Because historically, there's been, it's very much been around, operational efficiency. But in fact, as we've just already started talking about, there's more kinds of value that people seem to be considering that this stuff can play now. So Todd, do you want to start us off talking a little bit more in depth, maybe about those different kinds of value, and maybe what that means for the way you might approach a piece of work?
You know, I think it varies by the different technologies that you implement across this intelligent automation spectrum. If you're more in the robotic process automation, a lot of those clients are looking more specifically to, okay, I want to look at cost, or I want to look at efficiency, but I'm not so sure that that's necessarily should be or is the driving force. I think that starts a lot of conversations. Obviously, every company is being asked to do more with less. So that's obviously something that's important. But when you think about Appian, for example, that should be I think there are going to be cost tangentials to that, but it should be more about how are you doing service better, how are you getting visibility in the process, how are you managing risk of the process. There's a lot of other things that I think organizations are starting to look at just beyond the more business case of take cost out around these processes. And I think as you start thinking about the technologies together as well, there's a lot more transformative value to it than just pure costs. I think one of the more interesting things also from the benefits I've seen is around the workforce and people, right? So we're seeing more and more organizations that are focused on their workforce, and where they're implementing these automations is actually improving morale, it's upskilling their workforce, it's having them focus on higher value added activities. It's driving a lot more benefit in those areas as well.
Right. Anne, I mean, have you got anything to add to that? Well, one of the things I'll just interject briefly, it just came to mind. I was actually sitting at breakfast with a client today, talking about that they're now exploring some of this technology, and rather than it being about, how can we take people out, they were looking at it from the other way around and saying, well, maybe actually we can do a better job, because where we were doing 3 things to validate this particular activity, now, well, actually we can go look at many more sources, and we can do it in a good time frame. And this, like you were saying, Todd, I guess that's more of a transformational way of looking at it. It's not just about how do we kind of shave time or cost off this.
Yeah,
What's your view?
And the combination of RPA with BPM really allows you to not only gain those efficiencies, but have more visibility into the customer, so that you have a single point of access to the whole customer profile, and then you can decide, okay, do I need to sell additional services? How happy is the customer? What can I do to add to the situation and improve the revenue for this customer? So it's an additive proposition.
So Anne, you just talked about visibility there, and that sparked a thought from me, which was that certainly I'm seeing from the technology community a really welcome focus, not just on the kind of operational automation piece, but actually what we can get from the instrumentation, and can we get better end-to-end views of what's going on? Is that something you're seeing as well?
Well, absolutely, because if say back in that address change example, if I see someone has moved from an apartment to a home, then all of a sudden the bank can provide services because they've got visibility to that customer, so they know, oh, this customer is moving to maybe a higher demographic property, so we can start to target other services to them. We can also use the knowledge that we have of all their other vendors or the power company to offer a change of address service to that customer. So there's all kinds of new services you can provide to this customer now that you know, and you've got basically that intelligence on the transaction that's taking place.
Very cool, very cool. And Todd, you've got something to add on that as well.
I think there's a tremendous opportunity when you start looking at, whether it's BPM or RPA, when you start digitizing a process, it's giving you a tremendous amount of value, or I guess information on how the process is performing. And it's something that, former life working in continuous improvement Six Sigma type programs, it's this concept that I'm calling 7 Sigma, which is really how do you think about continuous improvement in a more digital age? When I think a lot of organizations haven't yet thought through that. They have their legacy continuous improvement program, or they've embedded it in their operating model, and now they're standing up automation capability, but they're not connecting those two yet. And I think you're going to start seeing more of that in the next several years, where if you connect the two, you'll have both the visibility of how the process is performing, but then the agility that both BPM and RPA provide to be able to change those processes in a way that you couldn't historically do because of the cost timeline associated to more custom technology builds. So I think as companies start thinking about scaling both automation, they should start thinking also about continuous improvement and some of the tools associated to that to be able to identify defects, to be able to drive continuous improvement, harness that data, and take those more rigorous approaches on where they automate and why.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So let's sort of dig in a little bit more into the practicalities, and let's talk about challenges, because it's always easy to write up case studies that says, customer was sad, and then they used our technology, and now they're happy and everything's great, right? But of course, it's never that easy. And the stuff we're talking about, it's about business change. It's about big issues. So let's start. Well, who wants to take this one? Do you want to take this one? So,
Sure.
So talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges you see
Well,
the customers.
I think the
encounter.
biggest challenge with automation and process improvement is what I call the automation blinders, where you're looking at like the as is and just focus on the to be model. As an example, let's say there's a line at a store. Imagine that's my process. I'm in a retail store. People are waiting in line to buy my product. Well, how can I improve that process? Well, I can automate some activities. I can maybe redistribute the line across multiple checkout counters. I can stagger my products. But you always need to take a step back and say, what's the point of improving that process? Well, I want to make sure the customers are happier. Do customers want to wait in a line at all? No one likes standing in queue. So how do I change that to maybe like an Apple store model where there is no line at all? I just have people roaming around the store. So making sure that you don't have the automation blinders on, just looking at your process as it is right now and thinking about, well, how can I just make this more efficient? But rather using automation technology to truly digitally transform the customer experience and thinking about what are you really trying to accomplish here and how can automation technology make that goal achievable, not just revolutionizing something you already have.
I think one of the things you said there is projectizing it so that it's not too big an automation project, but you're really focusing on something you can accomplish and drive the results.
Yeah, knowing the business goals of what you want to accomplish.
Not designing this massive change and then you look at it and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, and to be honest, no one really likes processes, right? We all have to go and they just want their stuff. They want this now, especially in American culture. We have that idea of wanting whatever we want right now all the time. And automation is a great tool for that, and eliminating process should be one of the goals of that as far as that customer experience aspect in working with them.
One of the other things that we have challenges with are skills. So we need more RPA architects in the market, and so that's an area that I think we could use some more folks, young people, to skill themselves up in that area. So,
Todd, anything to add in terms of?
I think I agree with the points made. The only other thing that I see challenging organizations, and it's a little bit off Malcolm's concept, is they tend to get a few people in the organization very excited in one or all of the technologies, and then it's very much a hammer looking for a nail, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's good to have someone champion it, but at some point you need to start thinking at the strategy, right? So how do you think about disruption in your business, your industry, kind of looking at a more strategic view, and then how do you interject the technology there? And that, I don't think that happens as much as it probably needs to be, so that you're making the right investments. I've seen a lot of clients struggle with, they got going, they finally got buy-in, but they chose the wrong processes to get started, and they were either too complex or no one cared about them, or for a plethora of reasons wasn't necessarily the right place to start, and that has stalled their effort. I think tangentially to that, the other challenge is scale. I think a lot of clients get those POCs, get those pilots, have success with them, but they really struggle on how to scale. And this is really kind of a scale game, right? So you're going to get incremental value out of both, Appian and Blue Prism, but you're going to get transformative value at scale. And I think a lot of clients are still struggling with how do I get to that scale and how do I look at it as part of my enterprise strategy.
Okay, and so I'm just kind of joining the dots a little bit here. And I'm wondering, because you were talking about, how you see some clients kind of really failing to get the right context around what they're doing. And in fact, you were talking also about the outside-in view. And Anne, you were talking about the need for more architects. And I'm wondering, whose fault is it? So who is it who's missing the point in organizations?
The technology vendors, clearly.
No, it's clearly the consultants.
But it may not be any of you. I mean, but is it perhaps is there a responsibility here on the architecture community? Is that a failure of that community to really connect high enough, or what's your view on that? Is there?
I think there's shared responsibility. Technology, consultancies, we all need to own this. I think the biggest challenge is this pace of change, right? This is, if you look at the last 20 years as new tech, I've been part of a lot of new technologies that have come into the market. The pace of change now is nothing like anything I've ever seen. And quickly how things change, the vendor landscape itself, there's everyone's like, who are the players here? Right now, I think I have like 2,200 in the intelligent automation space, to the point where we just launched a machine learning algorithm to track the technology market because we couldn't do it anymore with our resources, right? So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and this is something I do as a full-time job. So think about most organizations, there isn't someone that this is their job. They are coming in and out, they're hearing what they hear, and then they're trying to make sense of a very broad technology landscape, and then try to solve a very, much more challenging set of business challenges and changes in their industry as well at the same time. And I think those coming together is creating a challenge. And you're starting to see organizations thinking of this at a higher, more C-suite level with chief digital officers, chief transformation officers, people within the strategy kind of in that same suite that are thinking about the disruption, the technology, and then how that maps to the strategy. And I think that's what a lot of leading organizations are going to start doing more of.
I really hope so. I mean, I've come across so many chief digital officers that really they're only focused on marketing technology.
Yeah.
They don't really care about any of the operations stuff. That's kind of that's boring. Somebody else's problem. But
you need to do both, right?
Yeah,
if everyone says what, but again, it depends on your business, right? Every business has their own kind of strategy, and sometimes it's one or the other. But ultimately, if you focus just on driving great product to the market and forget your operating model, you're not going to succeed. And if you have a great operating model, but you're not driving great product, you're not going to succeed either. Ultimately, you're going to have to do both.
Right. Yeah. So, and just picking up on that point again, I know historically a lot of RPA technology, like Blue Prism as an example, will initially find its way into an organization through operations guys and gals in a business, on the business side. Do you see that there are any challenges around kind of how that then progresses from there? Are there any words of wisdom you'd have for organizations in terms of how they maybe take that interest and develop that in a sustainable way in their organization, or how that migrates from maybe the spark in some operations person's head to something that really scales and works?
Yeah, truly building a center of excellence within the customer environment is really critical for RPA. And then really you can show the benefit of the projects you've completed and then spawn out from there, what are the next set of priorities to accomplish, and then get the skills organized around those projects and have an internal kind of, marketing's the wrong word, but evangelism function around what's happening with automation and how you've transformed departments. So I think that's key. And then building the technical skills to support it and having the IT function come alongside is critical, because it really is led by line of business. It's solving business problems.
Right.
But the IT function then needs to surround it with those new skill groups. So that's pretty,
so it's really a collaborative effort.
Very much so. Yes, those two have to work in concert.
Yeah. And I know that's been a theme very much in the kind of the process and the workflow parts of the universe as well, right? That the need to drive that collaborative environment has been huge.
Well,
for a long time,
it's also why at Appian we very much encourage all of our customers to adopt an agile delivery methodology, because the value of agile is not actually delivering software faster or more frequently. The number one value I always see is aligning business and IT. It's going to force, through agile methodology, it's going to force business and IT to talk more frequently about what they're trying to accomplish, and therefore validating exactly what the goals are and the designs of the software to meet those goals. Typically, when people adopt water scrum fall, they fall back and we're only going to meet once a month or once every other month, and it's not good. You need to do those daily sprint stand-ups, you need to do those weekly sprint reviews, make sure business understands what IT's doing, and of course that IT can validate that and iterate upon it and deliver very quickly.
Right.
Wagile.
Wagile. There's a new word I haven't heard yet.
Make up words.
So there's an elephant in the room. Okay, it's an elephant in the room, and now it may be an imaginary elephant. It may be a real elephant, and so but something that everybody seems to want to talk about is when you talk about automation, and particularly when you start to talk about AI, which kind of might sound a bit scary, or robots. People want to talk about, okay, well, what does this mean for our people and the jobs that they have?
The robot overlords are going to take over the world.
Yeah.
Exactly. But is that what's really going on here in your view? I mean, is that something that organizations really need to be worried about? What's the right kind of approach to take to really kind of drive maybe more the human side of the change
Yeah.
management piece? Then who wants to weigh in on this first?
Yeah, we
Huh?
say that we're taking the robot out of the human. So that's the way
Okay.
we at Blue Prism contextualize it. And there are a lot of things that I have to do as a knowledge worker that are not my favorite thing to do, like expense accounting or going through resumes or whatever, doing my travel booking. And if robots can pick up that kind of work to free me up to do the more important work that I've been hired to do, that's brilliant. So it makes me more effective in what I've been hired to do.
That's interesting. So one of the things I'm taking away from that, which I've heard some other people talk about as well, is that it's maybe not helpful to always think about jobs in entirety, but actually focus more on individual tasks.
Yes.
And that's where the impact is around task, not an entire role.
Yeah.
Would you? Okay.
Yeah.
Malcolm, Todd? What?
So you're seeing, I think the ethical use of automation is becoming a pretty big topic in C-suites and boardrooms, and it's partly fueled by the media. You see the quote, 50% of the jobs are going away. So there's certainly a lot of interest in corporate America and more broadly to say, okay, well, what does this mean to the workforce? And I think there is a growing sense within that community and kind of this next, what I'm calling this next version of corporate responsibility, right? Not that green initiatives are not still important, but there's going to be
Right.
a sense of part of that agenda is going to be thinking about the workforce and how, the should versus could of automation. Should you automate, could you automate? Yes, but should you? What does that mean to the workforce? I've had one of the executives I work with tell me, well, if I automate all of this work, these people aren't going to have jobs, and those are the people that buy my goods and services. Right, so how do I think about that? There's also a lot of studies that show, consumers want to purchase from ethically responsible, socially responsible companies. So you don't want to be that tweet that says, right now there's a lot of tweets looking at jobs going offshore, but it's only a matter of time till there's the sentiment around the tweeting of the automation took American jobs as well, right? So I think there's a lot of people that are very interested in that. I mean, ultimately, every organization I work with, they care about their workforce, they understand, and they want to make them part of the journey. I think yes, there will be some challenges in the short term just because of the speed of change, right? So if we look at manufacturing, we look at the Industrial Revolution, we look at the periods of change prior, this isn't necessarily new. What is new, though, is the pace of change. This isn't going to take decades. This is probably going to play out more quickly than that, like in a decade, not decades. So I think that's going to be the challenge. How do you bring a workforce along? And if you automate certain tasks, I think the concept is, well, I'll upskill them, we'll find new things, we'll provide better value to our clients and customers, we'll create entirely new job categories. Someone I work with talks about it all the time, saying, who's going to be the drone mechanics, right? We're going to create entirely new classes of job categories out there. The challenge is when I talk to educators and lecture at universities, I don't know that our education system is going to be able to move fast enough. Are we educating the workforce to the jobs that are going to be here in 5 years? Have we thought about that in our own kind of corporate programs as well on what are the job categories? How are we going to manage this? And you're seeing that a lot of times with CHROs as well, really starting to think about, oh my gosh, I need to start thinking about my workforce and how I'm going to bring them through this journey, because I think most companies do feel a sense of responsibility to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anything to add on that, Mel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the progress of AI it's a long journey. So we see a lot of interest in it right now, but it is going to be decades or even more. I've heard other futurists like Dr. Michio Kaku describe current AI as being about the equivalent of a lobotomized cockroach. So it can move around, it can understand where it is, but it can't really survive on its own. And that's where AI is today. So you think about what you should be doing around AI. There is a lot of value in adopting it, but it's a long journey. You don't see it like, hey, I did AI in 2018 and I'm done. It's looking at it and saying, well, where does it make sense to apply? Where can I actually improve the workforce? And where can I actually apply the intelligence that a human has in a more meaningful way in my business? Because again, the AI is very far from doing the same equivalent of what a human can do.
Right.
What AI is very good at is like robotic actions, doing repetitive things very fast, or doing very quick, simple calculations, and more cognitive services as well. But where they're not very good is figuring out abstract thoughts, figuring out abstract interactions with a customer. You're still going to have a human workforce supplying that. So I would say a journey what a company I would expect to be doing right now is they should have probably already adopted cognitive services inside their application. This should be natural language processing, image recognition, optical character recognition. These are things that you probably have already. If you don't, you need to be looking at. And it's the easiest way to jump into AI. The next thing is you should already have a team probably looking at machine learning. Machine learning is the next step up where you need to look at data scientists. How do I analyze my data? How do I understand the impact of that data on the learning model? How do I continuously train the learning model to get the result I expect to make sure it's continuously evolving? And then more in the future, you should be looking at quantum annealing algorithms and quantum computing impacts. So that's very futuristic, but there are significant scientific breakthroughs occurring right now around quantum computing and quantum annealing that will have even more dramatic impacts maybe 20 years from now or so. It's something to just watch, but not actually dip into. Don't run out and buy a quantum computer. But
they're selling them down the road.
Yeah, they're selling them. Google has one, and a few of them have them. But jump into cognitive services now. It's really easy, and start tapping into machine learning services.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And so let's start to wrap this up. And Malcolm, in fact, you've already touched on some of this, but I wanted to, last of all, really talk about where you guys think this is all going. What's next?
Yeah.
And you've already sort of opened that up a little bit. Anything else you wanted to add on that?
No, it's just a natural progression of automation. It's something I see no real change from when computers were introduced in the 50s to how we're evolving. It's just constantly evolving through Moore's law. Computational power is getting faster, and of course, the pressure to provide digital solutions is even greater. But that's natural. It's what we've been doing with the past several decades as well. So you need to be always on top of it. If you're innovating, you need to be adopting latest technology. You need to be using cloud services, constantly exploring your business models and how they're going to be disrupted through digital technology, and figuring out how to play with these technologies with your operations for thinking about how the business will evolve.
Right. And what's your view? What do you think's next?
Well, I think we need to have a platform for plug and play because we don't know what's next. And we don't know kind of where all the technology is going to evolve to and what will be truly usable in a commercial sense versus just really interesting, cool material to think about, but we can't actually apply it to solve a business problem. So I think it's really important that we can build integrations so that it's easy to plug and play these new technologies in a commercial environment.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
And Todd, any thoughts from you on what's next?
Malcolm introduced the concepts of machine learning, and I know we didn't get too deep on the topic here, but to me, that's going to be really the paradigm shift or the profound change that we'll see in our lifetimes. We're going to move, when you think about automation and what we've covered today, we're going to move from a paradigm of people building technologies that automate to people that build technologies that automate, right? And that's, bear with me on that one, right? Okay. And so once that happens, right, that is going to be a fundamental shift in how we look at our businesses, how we look at our business and operating models, how we think about our technology services. Because predicated on machine learning, you're starting to see that now. Technologies are going to watch people, learn from people, and be able to do the work. And it's going to really disintermediate a lot of the people today that are doing the analysis, the build, the design, and a lot more of our focus is going to be on building the technologies that build the technologies. And I think that's going to be what I think is really going to be interesting, probably in the next 10 years or so, as you start seeing that play out.
Right. Death of the programmer.
Yeah.
Etc.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, kind of.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you so much, Anne, Malcolm, and Todd. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.